If you've lost hope for a better world, today we look at the power of a flickering wick. Stay tuned. Once in November, I was in the deep woods and it was dark, and I was working my way back through the woods, pitch black, cloudy, pitch black night, and my flashlight started to flicker. And in that moment, I said a prayer, "Oh God, no!" And you know, a bright light from heaven shone. No, it didn't. And you know what I did? Banged down the flashlight. And it came back on, and hope was resurrected in me. That flickering light came back on. And so then I started walking, and guess what happened? It went out again. Oh God, no! The light came back on again. And every time the light came back on, my hope was resurrected. And it just kept doing that until I got back to the car. That flickering light just kept coming back on when I needed it. The prophet Isaiah here describes a flickering wick as the people of God wonder if they're ever going to get out of the deep woods of their exile. You see, they're exiled in a land they don't want to be. They're forced to go there, and they're crying out to this God, "God, when will?" And he promises that that light will never go out until he brings them back. They had hope. Does it seem like hope is flickering today? Remember this thing called COVID? With our politics and our polarization and school shootings, we wonder if hope is going to stay lit or if it's just going to all fall apart. God has promised, folks, that the light won't go out on the promise of a better world. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. In other words, he's not going to do this by shouting and screaming. A bruised reed he will not break. You get the idea of how he goes about this, right? And a flickering wick he will not snuff out. This is a gentle approach. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. And he will not falter or be discouraged until he establishes justice on the earth. Of course, that justice, that world as it should be, certainly seems to be flickering today, doesn't it? But you know, a flickering hope is not new to those trusting in the promise of a better world. That's not a new thing. We're not the first ones to go through this. The Bible is full of stories of people, all they had was a flickering wick. Remember Abraham and Sarah, and she's way too old to have a baby. But God has promised that through her all the nations would be blessed, and they got to be going, you know, that light went out a long time ago. Huh? And God caused that light to come back on, and she had a child. Remember, there's the people of God. They're in slavery there in Egypt, and the army of Egypt is marching down on them, and they got a wall of water behind them, and they're going, "Oh, no, the light's about to go out." And God separated the waters, and the light came back on. Or there's, here in our story, there's the people of God carried off into exile. Again and again, they're not in the promised land. Looks like their light's gone out. And God rekindles their hopes and brings them back. Or in the Christmas story, there's Herod. He wants to kill all the baby boys. And God provides a way out for Joseph and Mary and the baby Jesus, right? To go through all that. And there's Jesus hanging on the cross. His life is snuffed out by the forces of evil. And God breathes on him in the tomb, and the hope is resurrected. Folks, this is our story, right? We are the flickering hope people, right? We're trusting in this Christ who will bring a better world, no matter how much the light is flickering. But you know, the flickering light is not just the promise of a better world. Watch this now. A flickering light is the very method of a better world. Let me say that again. A flickering light is not just the promise of a better world, it is the method through which a better world comes. Right? A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. This is his method. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on the earth. The method of the Messiah is not to crush bruised reeds or to snuff out the candle. The way Christ establishes justice on the earth is through the practice of not breaking bruised reeds and not snuffing out flickering wicks. History is the story of humanity breaking bruised reeds and snuffing out wicks, saying, might makes right. If they disagree with us, let's wipe them out. Because that works really well, doesn't it? We'll just kill our enemies. We'll just do nasty things in the name of doing what's right. You know, the civil rights movement was a flickering wick, wasn't it? As the police and the politicians tried to snuff it out. But the more they did, the stronger the light became. Like air to a fire. Even on a personal level, Martin Luther tried to snuff out his lack of piety with more religion. Right? Let's just try harder. Until the Spirit breathed grace over his life through faith. His little 95 theses, he's on a little door, he's a little piece of paper, right? And all of Europe caught on fire. Huh? The Reformation happened. The world was changed because one guy with a little... Advent itself was a flickering wick. You know, most people when Jesus was born, they didn't know something special was happening. They're just going on about their lives like nothing had happened, right? Only a few people knew. And those who did knew wanted to kill him. Right? Who hasn't heard of Christmas today? And anyone around the world doesn't heard of Christmas? Probably not. What started small, folks, little thing, has grown and grown and grown. We're surrounded by flickering lights today. All around the world, flickering lights. Hope. The cross itself seems like defeat, but it's the very wisdom of God to bring a better world. Huh? A flickering light is not just a promise of a better world. A flickering light is the method through which a better world will come. And so, folks, it's through our weakness, more than our strength, that God does his best work. You know, the Apostle Paul learned this. Listen, he was a snuffer-outer. He wanted to kill the Christians. We'll get rid of them. We'll snuff that out. Right? Until he was confronted by Christ. And then after 3 days where he's blind, the light of Christ shone upon him. And he went from being the snuffer-out to the one on the end of being snuffed out. He was beaten, he was tortured, he was whipped, he was frozen, he was starved, but nothing could shut off the light inside of him. No one could snuff out the light of grace. Henry Nouwen is a well-known author, scholar, teacher at Harvard. But the truth is, on the inside, he was burnt out. He was a pastor of pastoral psychology, but he wasn't praying much, and he was distant from God. And he felt the Lord urging him to abandon all of that, leave Harvard, and go work with mentally handicapped people. To work with the least of these. And he said he went there, and you know, none of them cared about his degrees. They hadn't read his books, nor would they care. In fact, he said one day he was talking, and a guy said, you know, don't offer him meat. One of his companions there, he doesn't eat meat. He's a Presbyterian. Right? And so there is Henry now, and he's not able to hide behind any of his accomplishments and his reputation. And that left him feeling very vulnerable and exposed and anxious. And then he goes on to say that this was the most important experience of his new life because he experienced what really matters, that love matters more than titles. What never fails? Love. Can I confess I've always wanted to be great? And there's that urge inside of us. We want to be seen. We want to be seen as strong and recognized and powerful and all of that. But you know the finest moments I experience? When I know I'm really being meaningful? Little acts of love. That's when I feel the praise of God, if you will, is when I'm doing little acts of things, little acts of love. And that's something we can all do, folks. Isn't that the path to a better world? When more of us do acts of love, even for those we disagree with. Or as Jesus reminds us, if you want to be great, become the least. And it's through our weakness, folks, more than our strength, that God does his best work. The hope of the world is still flickering. Let it be so. Amen.